Hi everyone, I delivered a talk at the Care Home Show in Birmingham last week, and I tackled a really tricky subject. I tackled vaccine mandates, because that's the big elephant in the room in the care home industry. Now, it wasn't a talk about vaccine mandates. You know, we don't need to get into the rights and wrongs. You'll have your view on that, and that's absolutely fine. This was about how do you handle the conflict? How do you handle the pushback against new health and safety rules, new health and safety procedures, and so on, because you will get pushback. And at the moment, the pushback on the vaccine mandates is significant. There's somewhere in the region, well, there are 40,000 people who are about to lose their jobs because they're refusing to be vaccinated. And in London, that's something like 21% of all care home workers. Needless to say, this is going to cause absolute mayhem. Standards of care are going to decline, some care homes are going to close, it's going to have a knock-on effect on the NHS and so on, and well, whatever, maybe all of that's necessary. You can make up your own mind on that. My point in all of this was, how do you handle the conflict? One delegate said it's just soured the relationships, it's just a toxic atmosphere between the managers and some individuals. Why? Well, why? Well, there's something called reactants. It's a psychological phenomenon. When someone feels forced to do something that they don't want to do, they push back. I often refer to the phrase force breeds resistance. If you use force against someone, if you try and force them, coerce them, manipulate them, push them, threaten them, if you use your authority in some way to try to get them to do something they don't want to do, right, they will push back. Now, the pushback varies from person to person. Some people it's extreme, some it's quite mild and moderate, can be managed. But it could be something as mild as just a slight demotivation, lack of motivation. Pushed a bit further, it could become ill will. They don't like you quite as much. It could be resentment. That's quite serious when they actively resent you. Now, how does this, what effects does this have? Well, you might find that their demotivation leads to a lower quality of work. They don't try as hard. Their heart just isn't in it. They might make more mistakes because they're not concentrating. You might find that they fail to report problems. They fail to communicate issues which you need to know about. They won't help you out. They'll start to withhold information, and they'll kind of, in a very passive way, seek to get a little bit of revenge in some way. They'll get their own back on you. Sometimes it can be a lot more active. One place where I went, I heard of employees deliberately sabotaging products. Sabotaging products in ways that the quality inspectors would not easily identify. And so it was the customers who then found the problem. This is just resentment. Yeah, and you want to avoid this. How do we avoid this? We avoid it most of the time by not telling people what to do. What we want to do more of is more asking people what they want to do. You want to do as much of that as you can. Ask people, what do you think we should do? What's the best way forward? How we should do this? How should we organize this? What would you rather do? Looking for solutions which they quite like. We want to do more of that and less telling. As little telling people what to do as possible, because with the telling, there's always a possibility of getting a bit of reactance. If they don't agree with the thing you're telling them to do, then you're going to get a bit of pushback there. Now, obviously, with the vaccine mandates, there's no asking, is there? There's no asking. It's the law. It's like, as of the 11th of November, you can't come in the building because we're not allowed to let anyone in the building who's not double vaccinated. Okay, well, it's the law then. There's no argument about this. But it's still going to cause a huge amount of conflict. So how do we handle that? And how do we handle any conflict? Well, there's a great book by Adam Grant, and the name of the book escapes me, but I think it's his most recent one. Adam Grant is a Canadian psychologist, or American psychologist, I can't recall. But there's a whole chapter in his latest book about the Canadian healthcare system and how they started to tackle anti-vaxxers in the 2000s, because there are lots of rural communities in Canada with small pockets of anti-vax populations. And he said, well, we don't win people over by arguing. So I'll repeat that. You don't win people over by arguing, fighting, disagreeing. In fact, the psychologists have they've done many experiments over the years which show that the more you argue with someone, the more they dig their heels in. Doesn't matter if you're right. Doesn't matter if you've got facts, evidence, logic. Doesn't matter. Out of principle, if you argue with someone, they dig their heels in. This is the phenomenon of reactants. They do it to assert their autonomy. Yeah, they don't want to feel like they're a wimpy pushover. It's good for their self-esteem, actually. It's quite a healthy reaction in some sense because, you know, if you give in every time someone tells you what to do, you're a bit of a wimpy pushover sometimes. You lack assertiveness. And so maybe to reassert themselves, you know, to feel good about themselves, that they're independent human beings, sometimes they push back. Okay, well, there's a positive to this. Well, you've told them that they need to be vaccinated and now they're pushing back. Well, what do the Canadians figure out? Well, what can you do? Well, the first thing that we need to do whenever someone pushes back is that we need to resist the urge to argue. Instead, we need to listen. So step one of handling conflict, listen to what they say. And we need to be careful here. We're not listening and doing what we always do, which is to hone in on the things we disagree with. Like, stop listening to people and trying to find what you disagree with. Every time they say something you don't agree with. Oh, that's it. Oh, there are microchips in it. No, don't be so stupid. You know, it's like, stop that. Listen to them very carefully. And once you've listened, step number 2, repeat back what they've said in their own words. Don't twist it, don't change it. Repeat back in their own words so that step 3, you check that you've understood. Now you can jumble those up if you want to. You can say, all right, let me check I've understood correctly what you're saying here. Right? You don't want to do this because of this, that, and the other. So you set out what they've said to show them that you've listened, to show them that you've considered it, and you've listened non-judgmentally to all of this. Now, step 4 is we are going to judge at this point, but we're going to judge it positively. And what I would like you to do, what we all need to do, me in particular sometimes, is we need to focus on what we agree with. So if there's anything that they've said that you can agree with, then agree with it and say so. Now, maybe they've come out with a load of nonsense, but within that bit of nonsense, there might be 1, 2, 3 things which you can actually say, you're actually kind of right on that. You know, they might have come up with all kinds of stuff about, you know, Bill Gates and microchips and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, and the Pope's in charge of all businesses, all kinds of stuff. It's like, but then they might have said, well, you can still catch it if you're jabbed, and you can still pass it on to other people. And everyone else here is jabbed, so they're protected in case I get it and pass it on to them, so I don't see what the problem is. And it's like, and actually it's like, I mean, everything else I've said is nonsense, but it's like, but that's true. Now, we could debate some of the details, you know, we could say, well, yeah, you can catch it, but you're less likely to catch it. Yeah, that's arguing. That's arguing. Just focus on the things you can agree with. I can agree with those things. And so say to them, says, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you can catch it, you can pass it on, and everyone else is protected. You're absolutely right. Now, sometimes there's nothing you can agree with. Sometimes it is what it is. It's like they're wrong, you're right, or at least that's what you think. If there's nothing you can agree with, at least validate what they say. What does that mean? It means that show some respect and show some appreciation that they have an opinion and they're actually allowed to have that opinion. And their opinion is, in many situations, it's just as valid as yours. So it's kind of like that patronizing phrase, let's agree to disagree and you're entitled to your opinion. Now, I would never use that language because it's very condescending, but I would say something like, I hear what you've said, and whilst I may not agree on everything that you've said, if I were in your shoes, you've clearly given this a lot of thought, and if I'd have given it the thought that you had, and if I'd have looked into it like you had, and if I was in your shoes and I had your life, it's like I might have come to the same conclusion. Now, you're not agreeing with them. That's different to agreeing. You're just showing some appreciation that if I walked a mile in your shoes, I might see the world through your eyes. This is a very powerful statement, and this is what the Canadian healthcare system discovered when dealing with their small populations of anti-vaxxers. When you say to people that, I respect your view, and no matter what we disagree on, I respect your right to make the best decisions for yourself. It's like, it's your life, it's your body, you can make the best decisions. You know, I have no rights to impose my decisions on you. What you find is that takes the conflict away. people calm down, they simmer down. And then all of a sudden, you might find that they're more amenable to finding a solution to a compromise. And what the Canadian doctors found out was, as soon as you started to treat people with respect and listen and give them the right to decline things, and you supported that right, they found that people started to change their minds. Because if you force them to do something that they don't want to do, they dig in. But if you say to them, you can do what you like, and I fully respect your choice to do what you think is best, all of a sudden, some of them start to flip. It doesn't happen instantly, it takes time, but they start to flip. Now, step 5 in this, now you've agreed, you've validated. Step 5 is we're going to ask a question, a future-oriented question. And for the vaccine mandate, it could be something like, well, the government, as of the 11th of November, it's like, they're going to make us, bar people from the building. They're going to close us down if we let you in. It's like, what would you have me do? Or it could be, what would you like to do moving forward? This is a situation which is so difficult to resolve. What do you want to do? What's the best way forward for us both? If it was something else, if it's something like it's a pre-use checklist that they don't want to do, you could say, well, listen, I agree that it's bureaucratic and I agree that it's got all these things. I agree that it takes time to fill in this checklist. It's like, what changes could we make to the checklist which would make you feel happier about filling it in? And you might find that they come up with some sensible options. Now, maybe not for the vaccine mandate, because there isn't really an easy way out of that one. Not unless you've got a job somewhere outside of the care home, which you may have, but probably not. But for lots of other things, there probably is another solution. And so if they come back with an alternative, and even if that alternative is not quite what you hoped for, but it's still a lot better than what's happening now, I would snap their hand off for that. Of course, if their solution means you're still breaking the law, if there's still a serious risk of injury, of course, you're not going to be able to accept that solution. But if their solution is legally compliant, is an improvement, and does lower the risk to a reasonable level, it's like, well, go for it. Go for it. They've just got a different way. I tell you what, I would always take the way they are happier with than my way, which they're unhappy with. Because people will implement their own solutions a lot more enthusiastically than they will ever implement mine. So there we are, 5-step process. You listen non-judgmentally, repeat it back, check you've understood, agree where you can, validate, respect their decision where you can't. 5, ask a future-oriented question to get them to think about alternative solutions. And 6 is accommodate and compromise and accept that solution wherever possible. There we are. Bloody hell, this has been a long video, but I've enjoyed delivering this. I'll see you next time. Any comments? Drop them in below.